Got it. You nailed it.
And I just want to say, for people that are disabled, disabled veterans, people that are disabled like me from a work injury, he's going to fight for us. But he's going to also bridge that gap in generation. Yes. To bring the United States together as one again. That's what we need. And he speaks from the heart, and I'm speaking from my heart. And that's why I am your supporter. And I am voting for you. So, welcome Pete Buttigieg.
First of all, big thanks to Kevin for bringing us here. Thank you so much for hosting us here. We've been so excited to come, so thank you. And I'm overwhelmed by seeing the support here. Absolutely awesome. We've even attracted some red hats. That's a very good sign. Look, we have been thrilled by the way that this project has grown in the last few weeks. You know, just 1 month ago, I was just trying to help explain how to pronounce my name and convince people we wanted to and to see how quickly this has taken off, that has vaulted us into the highest tier of competitors for the American presidency is unbelievable. So I'm, you know, you start as an exploratory committee to see, will anybody return your calls? Will anybody take it seriously? Will anybody contribute to help you get on the debate stage? And we've seen all of those steps, and so I'm very pleased to let you know that we're going to be making some big news this Sunday. And, you know, what we found is the very things that people said might be a reason to write me off have worked to our benefit. The fact that I'm a mayor, admittedly, not a traditional way to get into presidential politics. But that's kind of the point. You know, I've got a very high regard for what some folks on our side are trying to do in the Capitol. Right now, we need a Capitol building that starts looking more like our best-run cities and towns instead of the other way around. When you were a mayor of a city of any size, you know what it's like to deal with everything from economic development to the occasional slightly comical parks and recreation controversy to a message in the middle of the night letting you know there's been a shooting or some racial sensitivity in the police department that you got to figure out how to hold the community together around. It is the strongest trial by fire that you can get, in my view, for something like executive leadership at the highest office in the land. So we have found that people are ready for that local leadership. People are ready for voices from different kinds of communities. You know, we can't just be a party for certain parts of the country. It's got to be all of us, coast to coast. And you know, for communities like mine, my city in the industrial Midwest, that is exactly the kind of community that this president is targeting, saying that the only way to get to our hearts is through resentment, through nostalgia, through an empty promise that we're going to be able to turn the clock back and go to a past that was never as great as advertised to begin with. The way our city grew, in an honest way, engaging our diverse corners of our community and keeping our focus on the future, is living proof that that is how we grow, and that there is no such thing as an honest politics built around the word again. And we talk about the future from the perspective of someone who belongs to the generation that has so much at stake right now. We're coming up on the anniversary of the Columbine High School shooting that happened when I was in high school. We are coming to be known as the school shooting generation. We're the generation that put forward so many of the troops that fought after 9/11. We're the generation that is going to be on the business end of climate change for the rest of our lives. Potentially the first in American history to be worse off economically than our parents if we don't do something different. So let's do something different. You know, one of the things that excites me so much about coming to Las Vegas is that this is a community that has always had an eye on the future. Matter of fact, the demographers tell us in the statistics that what America looks like in 2054 which is the year that I will get to the current age of the current president. Let that sink in for a minute. America will basically look then like Las Vegas looks today. So I'm here to get a glimpse of that future. And the question is, what's that future going to look like? What kind of future are we going to live into over the next years? And it's why I believe that what is at stake right now is not just a 4-year presidential term, but really the beginning of a new era. And that era could bring beautiful things, and it could bring really dark things. And that's up to us. That's why we've got to focus on our values, like freedom. I am done with the idea that freedom belongs to one political party. Than freedom from regulation, because there's a lot more than government that can make a person unfree. Your neighbor can make you unfree. Your county clerk can make you unfree if they think they get to tell you who to marry. Your cable company can make you unfree. You're not free if you're not able to start a small business because you're afraid moving jobs means you would lose your health care. You're not free if your reproductive health decisions are being dictated by male government officials in Moscow. You're not free if you're not able to organize for good working conditions and a fair day's pay for a good day's work. There's a lot of teachers today who don't even have the freedom to practice their craft because the only way the system can tell who they are and take their measure is through standardized testing. We got a better vision of freedom than they do. And we're ready to talk about what security actually means in the 21st century. There's a lot more to security than putting up a wall from sea to shining sea. Ask any veteran, of which this state has produced so many, about how much goes into security. The security means making sure that we're safe here at home. The security means taking into account 21st century threats, like election security, that those in power don't want to talk about because it's embarrassing. Like the security implications of a rising tide of violent white nationalism, which the current administration can't even bring itself to name. Security issues like climate change, and do not get this wrong, climate is a security issue. So let's put forward solutions on what a 21st century security picture actually looks like. And let's talk about democracy, because our democracy is on the ballot. Our democracy is in danger. And we should never forget that it is your democracy, more than anything else, that keeps us living in a country where the government works for us instead of the other way around. That's why so much is at stake in making sure our districts are drawn so that we actually get to choose our politicians instead of our politicians choosing their voters. That's why we got to get money out of our politics. And if it really is true, I don't think it is, but if it really is true that the Constitution says that money equals speech and dollars equal votes, then it's time for a constitutional amendment to clear that up. And if every death or retirement on the Supreme Court gives rise to an apocalyptic ideological struggle that makes our court on a pathway to being viewed as a nakedly political institution, then let's reform the Supreme Court so that doesn't happen anymore. The great hope of this country is its capacity for self-healing, and when there's something wrong with the system, we can figure out how to fix it. That's why these mechanisms are there in the first place. And when we get it right, we're in touch with why politics actually matters, which is not what's happening on cable. It's not who looked good in the committee here. It's we got to change the channel from this horror show that's going on in Washington. When we change that channel, what we see is where American greatness actually lives, which is in the potential that America holds for our everyday life. Everyday life is where politics actually matters. And I felt that time and time again in my life. I felt it when I was packing my bags for Afghanistan, and writing a letter and putting it in an envelope that's had "just in case" written on the outside. and leaving it where my folks would know where to find it. That's how I know what's at stake when an elected president makes a decision about life and death for America. I felt it on one of the toughest days in my life at home when we were dealing with an illness that would eventually lead to the end of my father's life, and my mother was in the hospital. And I had two things going for me that day. Driving from my mother's hospital bedside, where she's laid up with what turned out to be a serious cardiac event, to drive out to where my father's getting chemotherapy and let him know, the kind of thing you don't want to put into a text message, that she's going to need open heart surgery. And I had two things going for me that day. By the way, Mom's fine. First thing I had going for me was Medicare. So we had some tough decisions to make that day, that week, those months. But all of those decisions, those wrenching decisions, it took a lot out of me as somebody who makes decisions for a living, that I was still unprepared for. The only thing we had to make our decisions on was what was right medically for our family. We didn't have to make decisions in fear that we would be bankrupted, because this country made a choice. This country made a choice that when you reach a certain age, a medical condition will not bankrupt you, and I want that to be available to every American. I had going for me, and maybe you've heard of him, is this guy named Chaston. My husband. And it was totally natural for him to be at that bedside in that hospital waiting with her while I was going out to find my dad. Because he was a member of our family, not just in my heart, but in the eyes of the law. My life has been shaped by decisions, good ones and bad ones, made by people in Washington with power over us. All of us are. All of us are vulnerable to the decisions that our leaders make. And that, to me, is the stuff of politics. We'll talk about our policies. As Democrats, we talk about our policies a little too much, maybe. We'll talk about our values, which we've got to do just as much as our competitors on the right have done over the last 40 years. But more than anything else, we've got to talk about our lives, our everyday lives, and why all of this even matters. That's what this is about. Running for office is an act of hope. It's an act of belief in this country and hope that when we use the political mechanisms that make America America, as messy and as sometimes broken down as they can get, and we can fix that into something that's going to make our lives better. That's why I'm doing it. Running for office is an act of hope, and so is helping somebody running for office. So can I look to you for a little bit of help? I didn't come into this thing as a household name, but I absolutely believe that if we do the right engagement, the grassroots involvement, we can build an organization that is going to surprise everybody. Yeah. And it's going to win in November 2020. Sign up on HeatForAmerica.com. I'm going to need you to grab a friend. I'm going to need you to, until they tell you they're sick of it, I need you to push that stuff on social media. That's how we're going to build something, not from the top down, but from our supporters on out. And I totally believe that with us, we can beat all the, we can beat expectations. I know this is a crowded room. I know it's pretty warm in here. It's important to me to try to have a bit of a dialogue. So let's do a couple questions, and then we'll just interact one-on-one as much as time allows. Right here in front, sir.
Yes. I have a lot of concerns, climate change, healthcare, infrastructure, but one of my biggest concerns is the damage to our democracy that the Trump administration has done and continues to do. You know, fake news, enemy of the people, undermining our intelligence services, our judiciary, demonizing groups of people. The day will come, hopefully sooner than later, that we're rid of Trump, but we're going to have the Trump supporters. What do we do to try to repair the damage? And political differences don't bother me. Fine, I'm a lifelong Democrat. I have Republican friends. But what do we do, and particularly with the younger generation, who have drunk the Kool-Aid, and how do we restore the faith in our democracy and our institutions?
Right.
And modeling dictators.
Right.
I served in the Foreign Service.
Thank you.
And the damage that we've done with our allies.
That's right.
Is horrendous.
No, that's right. If you didn't hear it, the question is, what are we going to do about the damage that has been wreaked by the Trump phenomenon, not just while he's president, but among his supporters for the generation to come?
Yeah.
And what's so disturbing about this, it's one thing for them to be turned against the Democratic Party or turned against me, or that's politics.
Exactly.
But when they get turned against the American system, when they get turned against the American way, the idea that the press is not the enemy of the people, it is an instrument of our democracy. The idea that the integrity of our elections is part of what makes our country what it is. The idea that the response to somebody who disagrees with you is to defeat them at the ballot box, not to lock them up. That other set of ideas is an assault not on our party, but on our way. And so we got to do something that's not going to be easy to do. But think about that relative. We all got at least one. They got that look in their eyes. And we're going to have to do something really tricky. Because on one hand, we can give absolutely no quarter to racism, to xenophobia, to Islamophobia, to any of these darkest instincts that have been around. And at the same time, here's the hard part. We're going to have to find in ourselves the humility to remember that we're not better people because of how we voted, and they're not worse people. That you put your arm around your relative or your friend or your neighbor, and you try to guide them to a better way. Because we're going to have to live together after this thing comes and goes. And the damage of this presidency will absolutely outlive the years that this president is in office. So we're going to have some work to do, and we're going to have to model a better way. Not just preach it, but walk it. That'll be the hardest part. But we can help each other get there.
I would like to know, in my humble opinion, our country is not being run. It's being run by big lobbyists. Three major billion-dollar profit-making entities: big pharma, big oil, and insurance. And I'd like to know, how are you going to approach those lobbyists who are being paid millions of dollars? I'm an environmentalist, I'm a huge Social Security, Medicare, all of these things. And a lot of it, we don't approach the lobbyists if we can't get in there with our big dollars, and I don't know. So,
Yeah, the question, if you didn't hear it, is about the way that the lobbyists of the biggest industries have basically tilted or skewed, put it into my words, but hopefully this is faithful to your question, tilted or skewed our politics away from what people want. There's example after example of this, by the way. This is why I think we have to talk about fundamental democratic reform. It's not because I think it's easy. It's because I think we need to be more, frankly, more ambitious in our reform agenda. Otherwise, nothing's going to get done right. Think about basic things like universal background check. By the way, thanks for delivering that here in Nevada. But on an issue like that, or even a divisive issue like immigration, most Americans actually agree on most of the outlines of what a bipartisan reform package would look like. But Washington can't deliver. Congress won't do it. This president has achieved something remarkable. It's one thing to take a divisive issue and bring people to consensus around it. That's what leadership is. They've actually managed to take a consensus issue and divide people. It's a dark magic. And the only way we can outfox some of these folks that have captured our institutions is through people power. They've got their own institutions, they got their own think tanks, they got their own media. And we're going to have to poke those bubbles, which, by the way, is why you'll see me, a bit controversially, going on conservative television shows. back in here. So just one more, and then.
As our next president, you specifically outlined your plan for healthcare.
Yes, question about healthcare. Here's the way I think we get to single-payer or Medicare for all environment, which I believe Americans deserve. I also believe every politician who lets Medicare for all come out of their mouths ought to have an explanation of how you're going to get there. And the way we do it, in my view, is to take a version of healthcare like Medicare and make it available for everybody to get into as an option on the exchange. And if people like me are right, that this is going to be not only more accessible but also more efficient than the corporate options, and I think it will, especially if we do some of the technical fixes that have to happen, then it will be a very natural glide path toward Medicare for all because it'll be more competitive. I suppose it's a way to dare the corporate world one last time to come up with anything better, but I don't have the highest expectations on that. So we make that available. We call it Medicare for all who want it. It's the American way. You have a choice. But I really am convinced that if we get that right, it will take us to a single-payer environment. By the way, even in a straight-up socialized medicine environment, which is not what we're proposing, even there's still private clinics, there's still private insurance, where this is not Soviet communism coming to our shores. This is something that the residents of every developed country in the world, except us, have. Why should Americans settle for anything less? So I'm going to let us, hopefully we can mingle, you can get a little bit of oxygen. Thanks again. Speaking of lobbyists, we're not taking any corporate PAC money, so if you or anybody you know is motivated to help us, one thing you can do is go on feedforamerica.com, sign up, chip in, and we'll be building a grassroots organization to help build that kind of neighbor-to-neighbor, friend-to-friend, member-to-member body of relationships that's going to carry us through. I believe we can do this if you're at my side.